Hello everyone and welcome to Sunburned. Albino ranks every boss in Lies of P from easiest to hardest, except the Atoned, which is a basic NPC stalker enemy that I did not get to fight because I picked the wrong dialogue option, but those kind of fights are pretty samey and simple, so it's probably no big loss, and we still got the rest of them. Lies of P is an absolutely fantastic Souls-like game that stands head and shoulders above the competition in my opinion, and it's got some pretty great bosses that range from cakewalks to pretty frantic and difficult. Story spoilers abound, footage is taken from my first playthrough I streamed on YouTube where I had a live death counter running for the entire game, and I did not use any NPC summons, now starting from easiest and working our way to hardest. Number 23, Robber Weasel. The easiest boss in Lies of P is Robber Weasel, though you can interchange most of the NPC fights for that spot, since you can run a train through almost all of them. To reiterate, the death counter is for the whole playthrough. I did not die 55 times to Robber Weasel. If I did, I would not have made this video. I'd be too busy voluntarily committing myself to a psychiatric facility for game journalists. Robber Weasel's weapon breaks with like 4 power blocks, and there's nothing threatening about flailing around with half a fire axe. You couldn't chop down a bush with that thing. You're not getting through several inches of my thick puppet steel. Murdering starving children wasn't on my bucket list, but at least it was self-defense. Number 22, Black Cat, the sting of betrayal. In my playthrough, I was nice to these guys at every turn. I bought his collection book in the factory, I gave him a gold coin fruit to help with his encroaching blindness, and in response, this Sanford and Son-ass duo attacked my hotel and kidnapped my human daddy. So no, I am not going to give you more gold coin fruit. I'm going to take away all your other senses too. Like Robber Weasel, Black Cat's weapon was also made in a glass factory because it shatters like it was designed to. There's nothing difficult about the moveset either, and since we're near the endgame by this point, a fight like this is comparatively easier than earlier NPC fights where you haven't gotten a chance to get good at the game yet, even if they'd technically be less of a challenge on a replay. Number 21, Puppet of the Future. If these are the puppets of the future, that dude who married a regular one is gonna have to alter his preferences for wife number 2. Did you know you can expel the poison from this area by finding a lever somewhere else in the factory? I wondered if it was possible because of Dark Souls 2, but I didn't find the lever right away and just figured I'd pull a baller gamer move by fighting it in the corruption, and it's not that much of an issue. The boss barely moves, you'll just see the occasional stomp or the upgraded double-footed stomp he unlocked in a skill tree. If his wrecking ball arms start to rotate, it's a devastating attack to get hit by, but you're perfectly safe between his legs, and if you decide to fight the guy in poison like me, just use your anti-ailment potions maybe 5 to 10 seconds after the corruption fully builds up. The DOT is pretty minimal, and there's honestly no excuse to get hit even once by this guy once you know what he does, so you can let your health dip pretty low. Puppet enemies are also weak to shock, so you'll see a big damage difference if you coat your weapon with it. You'll fight 2 more of these guys later, but I'm not counting repeats. Number 20, Red Fox. Born December 9th, 1922, John Elroy Sanford, better known by his stage name Red Fox, was an American stand-up comedian, actor, and apparently a cross-dressing stalker, but don't put that in his Wikipedia page. Red Fox has a string of Red Fury attacks, but the perfect block timing is pretty rhythmically consistent, to the point where her doing it is more detrimental for her than for you. She's got some heft to her swings though. Some of her running slams can bowl you over. Grief is a powerful force since I killed her cohort like an hour ago. Number 19, Mad Donkey. Mad Donkey is harder than Red Fox, only due to your time played being like not even an hour at this point. His attack patterns aren't difficult, they just vary wildly in their speed, which makes avoiding them not happen sometimes. But stalkers, especially this one, can be backstabbed pretty easily if you just wander around to their ass while they're swinging at where you used to be. So if you were a big circle strafer and other Souls-likes, these are the battles where that pays off. Number 18, Survivor. According to the lore, better stalkers were afforded better choices when it came to picking animal masks, while the shitty ones got stuck with wimpy animals, and this dude's wearing a mouse mask, so he must have narrowly avoided cockroach. Survivor has this unique aspect to him where sometimes he just won't stop swinging his sword for anything. He's another easy stalker to backstab, but the room is tiny and there's a standing desk in the middle of it, so getting away from his wild yet consistent slashes can be easier said than done. Number 17, Parade Master. Parade Master is a great first boss. The people used to dodging in other games can dodge to their heart's content here, as there's only like 1 Fury attack, and you have plenty of time to run away from it if you're not confident in your perfect blocks, whereas perfect blockers can enjoy pretty telegraphed attacks with only a couple mix-ups, leading to greatly accelerated staggers. In this footage, I was still a Brooklyn dodger. I didn't even try to perfect block anything. I was bad at Sekiro, so I wanted to just Bloodborne my way through every fight in this game, minus the gun. And while that works on this boss, let me be super clear that perfect blocking is better to do like 90% 90% of all instances. It lowers the enemy's weapon durability so it can actually break if enough of them occur, leading to decreased range and damage, which is immensely helpful on some fights, and it builds up their invisible stagger meter faster, so their HP starts blinking white more quickly, giving you more opportunities to carefully land a charge attack to put them in fatal attack state. When the boss HP turns white, a lot of people see red and turn their brain off trying to land charge attacks with no thought anymore. You still have to pick your moment, and a lot of charge attacks are slow, so you want to make sure you're waiting until after they finish an attack or a combo to try and land one. If the window feels like it's disappearing too fast, you can extend how long it lasts by using quartz to pick specific buffs in your skill tree, which will help a lot. Otherwise, don't feel like you have to throw your entire attempt away chasing a charge attack if the boss is doing a good job avoiding it. Some fatal arts can also activate the fatal attack stun. I only tried like 3 different ones, but they all worked, so if the fatal art on your weapon is faster than your charge attack, maybe try that instead. Fury attacks can be intimidating to try and perfect block on first sight, so what I like to do is run from them initially, try to internalize the timing from afar, and remember it for next time. You won't get better if you're too afraid to try stuff. All I know is that by the time I fought the Cathedral boss, I went from 90% dodging to becoming a perfect blocking fiend and saw much better results, though there are still some times when dodging is better. Number 16, Owl Doctor. If you've got a big sweeping weapon, you're going to be super annoyed. This battle takes place in a cabin with a sturdy support beam right in the damn middle that you'll be on opposite sides of like a tetherball pole most of the time while half your attacks get deflected by it. One of my only complaints about Lies of P is that walls and obstacles hate you way too much. They don't want to let you do anything. I had to upgrade an entirely different weapon with thrust attacks just to take into some of these narrow corridors. I'm using a technique build in disguise. This might be a heavy-ass saw blade, but it's attached to the booster glaive handle, so it scales with technique. Later, I switched to the Dancer's curve sword handle, which I think has a better moveset, but it further illustrates how regardless of your build, you can play pretty much however you want. Just don't get too crazy. Some weapon blades give damage penalties if you try to use them for certain attack types they're not designed for. Like this saw blade is great for slashing, but it sucks at stabbing, so if I put it on a dagger handle, I'd lose a lot of power because it isn't proficient in that damage type. Just make sure you check that in the weapon stats screen. You'll see arrows or equal signs indicating what it's good or bad at. Number 15, White Lady. It's just some white lady, and she is very upset in public, which is kind of on brand. This white lady is super annoying because she will randomly guard and deflect some of your attacks. Like one time I had her in stagger and I went to do my charge attack to put her in fatal attack state, and she just blocked that shit like it was nothing and went on crying about her sister. I was pissed. The fatal flaw in her exclusively thrusty attack style though is that her tracking is terrible. You can literally take one step to the side and dodge half her moves without even pressing a button. She's weak to backstabs like any other stalker, and they're more helpful here because she won't be able to deflect them. Sometimes she's on to you though. I tried to strafe her for like 5 seconds and we got into a little ballroom dance routine. It was very romantic. Number 14, King's Flame Fuecoco. Fueco has mostly slow attacks. The only thing to really watch out for is when he starts dumping his hot load on the floor, which radiates outward in a spiderweb sort of pattern and causes overheat if you're standing in it. If you do happen to get scorched, stop, drop, and roll to get the fire off you faster. It's pretty easy to close the distance when he starts shooting, and if he tries to continue to shoot at you while you're already right up in his business, the shots will just fly over your head anyway as long as you stay close so you can keep attacking. Number 13, Mad Clown Puppet. This dude gotta be in my top 3 most hated enemies. He is so goddamn annoying and constantly laughs in your face while he's hitting you with his bullshit. It took me a while to figure this out, and now I'm confident I'd be able to kill one on my first try, but getting there is incredibly frustrating. If you're at range, he'll do his Go-Go Gadget Extendo Arm, and perfect blocking it still knocks you off balance and doesn't do you much good, and a lot of times he'll just spam that same move over and over until you finally get close to him, but it has a hitbox on the way back too that you have to watch out for. Otherwise, it's basically mandatory that you perfect block his spinning attack, which consists of 6 blocks, with the last one happening a little slower than the first 5, and then another stray hit afterward, because if you perfect block that entire sequence flawlessly, it'll basically put him in stagger all by itself. The issue is it's very rare that this dude isn't doing something, whether hopping around or readying a body slam, so landing a charge attack can be dangerous to attempt. The booster glaive handle charge attack is great because it closes in on enemies at a short distance, so you can hover outside the range where they might start an attack and get free charge time while they're walking towards you. But yeah, for some reason I just cannot stand this absolute son of a bitch-ass clown. There are enemies objectively harder later on, like the one that jumps around and grabs you constantly, but this guy takes the cake, and you can tell because he's so fucking fat. Number 12, Door Guardian. Hold on, I gotta open Uber and see what the wait and save rates are for someone to drive me to the goddamn arena. This game got me wandering through the desert like John Wick waiting for the boss to find me. It's a 50-second full sprint run back every time you die to this gimmick fight, which consists of a giant troll whose attacks inflict shock for actually no reason, and who doesn't take any real damage until you stagger him enough to fatal attack him. I don't know if perfect blocking even helps here. I did it for 95% of the attacks in this footage, and it still took forever to get him on the ground, so it might just be about how many times you hit him. This boss introduces a concept I despise that is fully embraced by many bosses after him, which is the idea of you staggering him and putting him in fatal attack state, only for him to unleash one final hit before he actually goes down. In this case, his head landing on the ground counts as an attack and will flatten you if you don't dodge or block it. It's just annoying to be annoying. This is the kind of thing where the devs are like, alright, how can we piss the players off? The attack timings aren't hard to figure out, it just feels like it takes forever. But once you fatal attack him the second time, he'll die instantly and you'll never have to do the 100-mile dash again. Number 11, Walker of Illusions. This is one of those bosses that initially seems pretty difficult because you can walk in there and get destroyed by one combo, but for me it's also one of the only bosses where I beat it without ever really feeling like I knew what I was doing, so you can kind of just instinct your way through it. Hold the block button, dodge every few swings, and get a quick counterattack. Definitely dodge behind it instead of backwards. Dodging backwards is a great way to accomplish nothing and put yourself in a worse spot. The Walker of Illusions seems pretty bad at dealing with circle strafing. It's not good at reorienting the attack pattern towards where you ended up, so use that to your advantage. About halfway through, it'll spawn a clone of itself, but it has a really small health pool, so you can take it out quickly before it becomes too much of a problem. If you're running a technique build, the Falcon Eyes Legion Arm is a great way to start off some boss encounters where they just slowly walk toward you, and this is a great one to get like 600 free damage plus the extra stagger. I like to shoot the shot, embed it into their flesh, and then run up and do a sprinting attack to coincide with the explosion going off, since most non-huge enemies will have their poise broken by the combo, and it's easy. Number 10, Scrapped Watchman. This is a pretty hard boss for how early in the game it is, in tandem with the fact that you'll be doing next to no damage with your +2 weapons and have very little healing to work with. The death counter should be around 6 here. I wasn't updating it until I had actually beaten the boss. This is back when I was still just dodging everything, and there's utility in that when it comes to the second half, where a lot of his hits get delayed lightning AoE, but plenty of attacks should still be perfect blocked for that sweet, sweet stagger. You might look at this man and immediately think, wow, Dark Beast Parl clone, but while yes, it's actually no. The movesets are completely different, and you never go underneath the boss like with Parl. You've just got to be on your game with this one. I think Scrapped Watchman does a lot of heavy lifting when it comes to training players on getting good at Lies of P. Number 9, Green Monster of the Swamp. Thing looks like a giant Shadow Heartless. Unfortunately, it's got a lot more decay going on. Decay slowly lowers your health and your weapon durability, so definitely keep some anti-whatevers in your inventory to use immediately upon getting decayed. I think all its attacks can cause it, but perfect blocking prevents it from accumulating, and the only thing that'll really build it up is if you let it go bulimic and start puking on you. I don't know what it just ate, but the mirror said spit it out. In the second phase, it inhabits a Scrapped Watchman and becomes an enhanced version of the boss we just talked about before this, doing familiar attacks, but with a few tentacle-based twists worthy of a hentai award. If you call upon your previous knowledge of that boss, plenty of it still applies, so I don't think the second phase is that bad, but it does have a decent amount of health. The first phase is super weak to fire, but since it inhabits a puppet, I don't know if that still applies in the second. Number 8, Black Rabbit Brotherhood 1. The first time you fight this band of bunnies, it starts with the eldest wielding what I can only describe as Cloud's Buster Sword if it was a chode. This fight goes on a long time, with the other members jumping down at certain intervals, so the more perfect block damage you can do to the eldest's weapon before the rabbits start multiplying, the better, and his multi-hit combos allow for a lot of breakage. He'll be much less of an off-screen threat with an even chodier chode while you take down the other brothers as they come. The first is fast and agile, which can work to his detriment because it means it's easier to lure him away from his brother, who is pretty passive all things considered when he's got family on the field. You don't have to worry about the Chode Master as much as you think when you're attacking his brethren, so focus on them and land your stray hits in a speedy but patient fashion. With a bigger, longer, or uncut weapon, if you see a lesser brother running at you, you can usually time a swing to stop them in their tracks. They all fight a bit differently, but the strategy is the same to take them out. Lure them away, bait and punish their failed attacks, and look for the eldest running at you from across the screen, because that means it's time to move to the other side. This is a ganky fight, but we've seen worse in Souls games. Number 7, Champion Victor. Perfect blocking is still good for stagger, but you're probably not going to break this dude's knuckles anytime soon. This is what peak performance looks like, by the way. Ladies, find you a man with Solomon Grundy body who achieved his physique by huffing ergo. Champion Victor has 2 phases, but he at least has the decency to put them both on 1 health bar. His punch rhythm can be tricky to nail down at first. I needed several attempts just to internalize a couple of the combos. He isn't fast, but his attacks aren't naturally telegraphed either, and there are some feints involved that can definitely trip you up. In the second phase, his lunge attack and overhead slam are both one-off attacks with no follow-up that you can punish heavily. It might actually be easier than the first phase if you get equally familiar with what he's doing, but despite being 1 health bar, Champion Victor has a lot of defense to shred through, so you'll still be tested. Number 6, Fallen Archbishop Andreas. Help, he's fallen and he can't get up. This is the boss that taught me to perfect block, or rather, this is the boss that I died to 5 times, and then someone in chat said, perfect blocking is good, and I was like, alright, fine, I'll try it, and then I almost immediately fucking laid waste to the first phase. Perfect block, everything here. The tongue hits, the swipes, everything. I have a hard time with the timing on his fury attacks still, but those can also be ran from. In the second phase, the bishop emerges from the vacuous spider's spine, and they become Siamese twins like the Flexile Sentry from Dark Souls 2, where you can choose which side to fight if you run around to the other side. It's definitely easier to continue fighting the spider side because its attacks haven't changed much, although there is one new thing in particular you need to watch out for. If the spider stands up and starts charging a blue beam, run like hell away from it or you're going to take a fat wad of damage. This is the only attack out of any boss in the game that I would consider a difference maker in terms of winning or losing. It's not Millennia Waterfowl Dance level, but if you make a mistake and you're not at full health, you might just die instantly. Funnily enough, you can actually perfect block this attack, and probably dodge it too if you press whichever button at exactly the right time, and I found that out by complete accident, and it saved my run. Number 5, Romeo, King of Puppets. The King of Puppets has some Abritus action going on with those tentacles, so dodging forward on some of those attacks will probably be better than trying to perfect block them. The first phase, after a few attempts, is a sleeper, but you'll have to do it way more than you want to because of how long it takes to get through the second phase. The titular Romeo is the love child of Lady Maria and Sister Fried, which is nice to think about, and his attacks are tricky. When I beat him, it was by the skin of my teeth, and I wouldn't be confident in a rematch, but he doesn't do anything bullshitty, and I know that with time I'd have gotten more comfortable, especially after learning these later bosses. When he puts up his scythe to block, you should take his bait and hit it, then dodge the resulting punish and follow up with your own hit, turning his bait into your bait. Otherwise, I was grateful I still had so many fuel cells to burn, making a ridiculous amount of mistakes, and that his attacks weren't too punishing. Number 4, Black Rabbit Brotherhood 2. You killed their brother and they are back for revenge. A random brother will aggro you first when you walk in, but regardless of who it is, make sure you absolutely annihilate the youngest one ASAP. He's fast, annoying, and he coats his weapons in decay. Despite initially being a 3v1, the brothers who aren't aggroed won't really attack you unless you get close to them. A couple of them might toss a projectile or two, but even though this fight is even gankier than the last one, it's still not that ganky when most of the people on the field are just spectating. When it's down to the last 2 brothers, try and deal equal damage to them both so that both of them are one hit away from dying, because when one does die, the spooky ergo-infused ghost of the eldest brother comes back with a Chodley vengeance, ready to haunt your HP bar with his new powers, and you don't want this to still be a 2v1 if you don't need it to be. Kill both younger bros in quick succession and you'll be left with a 1v1 against a guy you've already killed before. He has a new Blade Beam attack and a couple variations on some earlier moves, but logistically you don't have to learn too much. This game is kind of like Wolong Fallen Dynasty in a way, because from what I've seen you can perfect block almost any kind of attack. In Wolong you can literally stand in fire and deflect the fire damage, or deflect an explosion, and in Lies of P you can deflect seemingly intangible attacks too, like the Archbishop's Big Blast and any energy or element-based projectiles as long as you're facing the right way. All told, this fight isn't as bad as it could have been, and I'm grateful. Number 3, Simon Manus. So it's a new day of me typing up this script, and it just so happens that Lies of P got a massive update that brings tons of balance changes and general buffs to the player experience. There were a lot of importantly nice things. In fact, basically the only thing they didn't do is the one thing everyone wanted them to do, which is increase the timing window of perfect blocks. It would only take a couple frames to be a super effective pacifier for like half the player base, but oh well. Great things they did do include reducing the weight of boss amulets, increasing the benefit of leveling up capacity, increasing the stagger window of normal enemies, lowering the HP of what I assume are some of the elite enemies, like hopefully the Jester. They made the butterflies less tanky, and they also nerfed a few of the bosses. Andreas, the first phase of the King of Puppets, and first phase Simon Manus all got reduced HP. King of Puppets' first phase was totally fine, so I don't know why they did that, but Manus actually got a few nerfs. His second phase does lower overall damage, and they made him easier to stance break, which based on the verbiage of this and other patch notes, I believe does not mean he's easier to put in Blinky White stagger mode. It just means that your attacks will briefly break his poise more often, which is probably nice, because this MFer is an absolute unit in the second phase, but we're getting ahead of ourselves. First, we deal with the Arm of God, which is apparently attached to the Hunchback of Notre Dame. Esmeralda is not going to be happy about this, or maybe we're finally setting her free to pursue men her own league. First phase Manus is a pushover, really. He's got long sweeping attacks, but they're heavily telegraphed and slow. The only thing that's annoying is if you're up in his face, he might hit you with his elbow while you're trying to perfect block the resulting sweep, so you have to adjust your timing. I didn't think he had too much HP, but I wonder if they did those first phase nerfs so people wouldn't have to take as long running a train on him every time they wanted to practice the second phase stuff, in which case, nice. Awakened God Manus is a different story. This is the dude who could have used an HP nerf. This fucking boulder never loses any. This is the only boss in the game where I felt the effects of their HP regen mechanic, because you spend so much time running away from giant AoEs and swarms of projectiles that it's hard to get hits in at a good clip. I assume that'll be less of an issue now that you can stance break him easier, hopefully getting some extra hits in that he'll have a tougher time eventually negating. Awakened God isn't the hardest boss, but I think it's the most strenuous. You have to pay attention to a lot more things, from giant falling hands that deliver gigantic AoE one-shots, to streams of disruption-inducing lightning bolts where if too many hit you, your meter builds up and you just die on the spot. His physical moveset is still nothing to write home about, but he often engages in it while you're already trying to dodge these other things that are happening, so it can create some unavoidable damage scenarios. He's like an on-field and off-field DPS at the same time. He'd be insane in a Genshin rotation. Number 2, Nameless Puppet. The best way to win this battle is not to fight it. If you let Geppetto take your puppet heart at the end of the game, you apparently don't have to do this boss, but I'm a boss ranker, which means I have to do things the hard way. This nameless puppet is the flesh and blood of Carlo, Geppetto's dead son, whose image he used to create you, and is being controlled by Geppetto marionette style, who is very upset that you're not allowing him to revive the real Carlo. The first phase will lay you out a few times, but it'll eventually become rote. The combos are pretty standard, and though he does modify his weapon mid-battle to alter his moveset, it's still pretty learnable. In the second phase, the nameless puppet's strings, and the top of his head for that matter, are cut, Mortal Kombat fatality style, and he is no longer under Geppetto's control. Thus, he becomes a lot fiercer and deadlier, and his combos get really damn hard to deal with. We got multi-hits, grabs, fury attacks, shockwaves, projectiles, combo fake-outs that are designed to punish panic rolls. It's all very frustrating, and everything you want out of a final boss if you're a masochist. Anytime he splits his sword into two, you're in for a bad time. Those are the combos that'll whittle you down with super fast multi-hits, and I would prioritize dodging over blocking here. Get your 1 or 2 hits per opening depending on the speed of your weapon, and don't go for too much. After defeating the puppet, actually it's you who has been defeated, as the puppet knocks your ass over and prepares to deliver a killing blow aimed right for your heart, but Geppetto gets in the way and takes the impalement like a champ. He just wanted his son back, but looking at you, he realizes his son was there all along. Number 1, Laxasia, the complete bitch. Nobody in real life fights like this, Laxasia. Nobody is out here doing 20 uppercuts in a row, speeding up and slowing down and pausing and unpausing like someone's fat ass sat on the remote. This is pure developer evil, and I hate it. Eventually you'll be glad when this stupid attack happens, because you'll get like 20 free perfect blocks out of it towards a stagger. It's just a little immersion breaking, watching a warrior whose fighting style is like how a 13-year-old would attack you in a fighting game. Can you dodge this? What about 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 this? Like, oh my god, stop mashing buttons, you absolute toddler. The first couple attempts you'll be like, what the hell is all this? I'm getting mollywopped out here. But give it enough time and this first phase will become easy too. One thing to make sure you do before it ends is break the shield on her back. It deflects your attacks and makes her take reduced damage when it's hit, but a few strong attacks will shatter it, and a great time to do this is when she runs at you with the sword dragging lightning along the ground. Just maneuver to the right around her and ready a charge attack on her back. Occasionally she'll swing her weapon wider than usual, which can hit you if you're standing too close to her side, but this is still the best opportunity to smash that thing, because if you don't, she carries it in her second phase and becomes a lot more annoying. Her second phase is probably the hardest thing in the whole game. Perfect block all her projectiles to send them back at her for really solid damage, and then it is absolutely imperative that you learn to perfect block her fucking instant transmission dive towards you afterwards. It's unreactable, at least for me, so you have to internalize the timing ahead of time, and you almost certainly won't get it your first few tries, but if you do, you get a lot of free hits and don't take 80% of your health and damage. Once she's on the ground, she flits around like a butterfly on crack, attacking, then teleporting, then attacking again, and is very difficult to pin down. Anytime she jumps in the air there, perfect block the projectile, some free damage there, and if you do happen to build up her stagger meter and land the charge attack, prepare yourself for the impending BS. Where other bosses might, I don't know, get put in fatal attack state at this juncture, Laxasia will run at you and do like 3 more attacks before finally exploding in electricity and getting stunned, at which point you may now safely fatal attack her. She's a dumbass cheater, and I hope she gets banned. Hide all your pumpkins this Halloween or she's gonna come eat them. Well, that's gonna do it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, you can like, share, and subscribe. I've got boss rankings for other Souls games, random rankings for random games, and I stream a decent amount on YouTube, so check me out if you want. Watch all my other videos until you get staggered, and I'll see you guys next time.